Hello, everybody. Welcome to this Governance and Circular Economy Roadmap session. My name is Kari Helvi. I lead the Circular Economy area at Sitra, Finnish Innovation Fund. I feel like a bit like Rod Stewart now. I have a bit post-flu, rusty voice, but I'm not going to sing to you anyhow. But I will present some of the key findings from our side to kind of back up the session itself. To tackle the major challenges like climate change and overconsumption of natural resources, we need global approach for circular economy. Emissions don't know borders. Material value chains don't know borders either. So it's really important to have global governance and intergovernmental coordination of policy making. And for that reason, roadmaps are very important. Like this morning was already stated that you have to have a plan to know where you're actually going to. Then when we think about the aspects of that couple of years' time, circular economy has been picking up speed globally as well. And of course, more importantly, also in the political spheres as well. And in many ways, it's really important that both circular economy and climate change mitigation are mutually reinforcing objectives. And for that reason, policymakers in both fields have to join forces. That is absolutely crucial because circular economy really is a critical tool to meet the Paris Agreement objectives. So it's obviously a big challenge as well. And for that reason, we need front-runner countries and especially also organizations, global, such like EU, United Nations, World Trade Organization, to outline global ground rules for policies. For example, EU has drafted the circular economy package, and the member states, more than 10 of them, have made their own roadmaps as well. And obviously, in different parts of the world, also circular economy has been picking up speed. So really, we need also to have many other governments on board and other organizations. And I really see that the World Circular Economy Forum could also play a role in order to kind of push us towards more concrete actions. Then already today was mentioned about the fair and just transition, that it's really important. And we have been also investigating that at Sitra, and it's very hard to define it clearly. What does it mean? Of course, we could also ask that are the benefits of circular economy distributed fairly when you look at from the geographical, demographical, or sectoral point of view? And there are, of course, many other risks as well. Can circular economy cut some countries out of the global supply chains that they have very hard fight for to enter? I think in EU there's a strong interest in this as well. For example, recent European Economic and Social Committee reflection paper towards a sustainable Europe by 2030 states that one of the key policy areas is really fair and just transition. So there's certainly interest to move to that direction. 2016, Finland established the first national roadmap for circular economy. And now, after 3 years of working very hard in the field, we updated the roadmap in March. And the main idea there is really to have an agile roadmap that we can actually also to update during the years to come. And we have published an article today, also in English. We have also putting kind of experiences from our side, how the process was done and what kind of learnings can we take from it. One of the key things is that the roadmap should be a kind of combination maybe of action plan, strategy, and then a roadmap to follow. And definitely it's about the collaboration and the stakeholders, because it's such a big move that we have to make and we have to get everybody on board. But also in the European Union level, the EU package for circular economy has been an inspiration for many countries and definitely turn it from national to regional, city and local level plans as well. I think it's a great example how you can actually have more international approach. And I really I congratulate also European Commission for the nomination of the best player in circular economy in Davos. I think it was a well-deserved prize for you as well. But of course, when we think about governments, we have to think about also other players. It's not only about the governmental plans. You have to have companies, you have to have cities, NGOs, and citizens involved as well. Because one of the findings from our side really is that the smaller the focus area that you are focusing in circular economy, you have higher social inclusiveness on the agenda. And I think that's really important to keep in mind, that it kind of becomes closer to the citizens and businesses as well. So of course we at Sitra really hope that in the future we see a day when we can look back and remember that there used to be linear economy. Hopefully that will happen. And once again, I warmly welcome you to the World Circular Economy Forum and this session. Thank you very much. All right, let's move on. So next we'll have a very interesting dialogue, the role of governance and roadmaps in the transition towards circular economy. And it's moderated by Harald Frild, CEO of Circular Economy. Harald, floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello, good afternoon. It's always difficult to come after Rod Stewart, because I'm certainly not it. But my first life I spent as a journalist, and I'll try to tell you a story beyond governance and roadmaps. And recently I talked to a futurist at the London School of Economics, and I asked him, what's the biggest challenge of these times? And he answered me, and this was to my surprise, it's governance. How are we actually dealing with each other and structuring life around us to make it happen in a sustainable way? And this we are touching upon today. I think the first part will be about governance and then about roadmaps. And we only have 25 minutes for that, and the clock is ticking here in front of me. And I want to talk about 4 things now. One is about pig. The second one is about 9.1%. The third one is how we make the transition. And the fourth one is the big question between opportunity and responsibility. That's the pig. And I think often I'm asked by my son or by people in the street, circular economy, fine, why are we in this mess? And then I pull up this picture and say it's the pig. It's the problem with instant gratification. And that doesn't only come back to consumers, which we all are, but certainly the politicians and business leaders that are often stuck in an old paradigm and where it's difficult to get out of. And I think we're in a position together as a community to make the change together, and that's why it's so complex, because we can only move together. So what we hear today, it has to be an inclusive agenda. It has to be inclusive in a way that we don't repeat the mistakes of the past. And it's not, we all saw the young generation, and actually again not here, and this really is so frustrating. They should be here at the same time. We had the same in our conference in Amsterdam. It shouldn't be young or old or middle age. I don't even know where I put myself, to be very honest. But it's not bottom up and top down. It has to come together. And we had a very interesting debate with Janis. Anybody who believes different, I think, will not be successful. And the third thing, which I came across in the last days, the question of gender equality also comes back in the circular economy debate, because recently we drafted our first proposal in the last 7 years where this was asked from us, please also put this component into this inclusive agenda, which I think is very important. This is the number we came up with about 1.5 years ago, how circular is the world. And the fact at the moment is it's 9.1%, and that's an interesting figure. It keeps your head busy, but it's really not about the figure. So we can debate with professors, is it 11%, 7%? It means there's a huge problem, and we have a huge opportunity. And I think this is very important that we keep ourselves reminding that this is unacceptable. And we recently had, and I'm talking to your head now, and I'm going to your heart, because this is the report we're going to launch in about 10 days from now. We're going to break this down on international reports. We have Austria as a client, and they asked us, so how circular is Austria? And I can't tell you the figure now, but I'll tell you it was very upsetting, because Austria thought as a recycling world champion, we are very circular. And then in the first meetings, we told them, no, that's actually not the same thing. And you all know the debate about recycling and circularity, because there, and we're going to find this in many other countries, especially in the developed world, we are, because of the fossil fuel industry and our dependency on it, there is a big problem with circularity around the topic which we have to all solve together. The interesting thing in Austria was, and I'm Austrian by the way, is that the debate was not about the figure, not about the head, but in the first engagement dialogues about the circular innovation process that we're leading with them, it immediately got into their heart. So how can we actually work together as business constituents with the civil society and the government? And this was really the interesting thing on kicking off this process, because Austria is quite new to this debate and not as far as frontrunners like in Finland. And thanks for the hospitality, Kari and your team. And then the question becomes, obviously, you have seen all these graphs. How do we get from a linear system into a circular system? And that's such a tremendously interesting debate that keeps me getting up every single day and drives our team forward. And many of you are engaged in the same debate because it is the question of our times. And it's not about circularity itself. It's not a goal in itself, but it's the roadmap that's going to lead to the SDGs. I think that's really the important topic here. And this is then the question that I really find interesting. I want to kick off the debate with. Some of you might have seen that it comes out of the research that was done around the book Donut Economics, and Leeds University put this onto a graph. And the graph reads like this. On the bottom, you see from left to right the transgression of the planetary boundaries. And then from top to from below to up, it's about the meeting of social demands. And the interesting thing is that countries like Netherlands, Austria, US, Australia, they meet all the demands of the citizens, obviously. But they do this at a high cost by, per country, transgressing all planetary boundaries. And I think that's a very interesting reminder and framing of the debate, because it is great that these countries are doing a lot, but in reality, they all have to move here, as countries like Vietnam, that was in this study mentioned as the front runner on the balance between not transgressing planetary boundaries and making sure that they are meeting the societal demands, that they do this in the most balanced way. And I think it really kept me very busy because it's turning the economic paradigm upside down. And this balance poses many questions. And I love, and in many debates with Yannis, we also underline this. It's a new debate that is taking us away from this old paradigm, East versus West, into a more balanced debate. And I hope this we can have today with 4 excellent speakers that are speaking from their heart and their mind. I know them very well. One is from Australia, Miss Alison Morris. Please come to the stage. Welcome. Maybe an applause. Yeah, great.
Thank you.
Alison. Director General Daniel Kalecha from the European Commission. Welcome. Mr. Janusz Potocznik, please join us as well. Co-chair of IRP and also a partner at Systemic. And Kirsi Suomunen. Welcome, Kirsi. Who is at the board of Sitra, our generous hosts. And obviously, as I said to you before the debate, I want to kick off with you because we have very interesting news also from your new Prime Minister and government that announced their policy agenda, their priorities. And now looking at it, and I think you had a little bit of time to see how circular the proposals are. Are you happy when you think about the young generation that is demonstrating and demanding more action, what the government is now proposing?
I think it's maybe too much to say that we are happy, because I think we all feel the pain that we really are sort of having a race with time, and there's sort of more and more sense of urgency about what needs to be done and how quickly. So it's required everywhere. But then, so looking at the proposal for the new government policy that as said just came out a couple of hours ago, after this morning, which sort of aims at strengthening Finland's role as a leader in the world of transitioning into a sort of true circular economy. Think all in all, being said that we are still sort of racing with time, competing with time, I think we are positively surprised and maybe impressed even sort of by the content and the level of detail that is included in the program. So we are definitely moving into the right direction and sort of have remembered the importance of sustainability and circular economy, and starting from very, very basic things of sort of how we make a more robust strategy for the waste management industry to make sure that recycling and bringing back your old goods so that it's made easy enough for the consumers, so the kind of the back-end logistics works, all the way to putting money on innovations that will facilitate this transition and creating markets for recycled materials, strengthening the recycling of nutrition, which is very important in our part of the country because we live by the most polluted sea in the world and sort of have the algae problem. That is one of the areas that's being looked at, and also sort of targets for specific areas and industries like textiles and plastics. So all in all, sort of without going more into the details, just giving you a feel of the fact that there are a lot of concrete targets and issues sort of in there, not just abstract talk about sort of how important the circular economy and recycling is. So it's looking good. It's sort of a good point to start from.
Very briefly, anything that makes you most hopeful? One thing?
But the fact that it is that high on the agenda, but you mean most hopeful about these specific
concrete measure.
details?
Often it's about the concreteness.
That definitely is included into the program. There will be a governance structure, sort of how this is going to be monitored and followed, and that will include concrete targets and how we measure these targets. So definitely, so it looks like that this is being done on a serious basis. And I know some of my colleagues have had sort of their foot sort of between the door in preparing this program.
I know Citra has been pushing this work very much. So
very much, yeah. And also some of my colleagues sitting in this panel. Yeah.
Janis, over to you. When you see this, I think, overview on East-West, what needs to be done, looking at global governance, what do you think needs to be the next big step? I think you have some ideas what really has to happen in the next years.
Thanks. Good day to everybody. By the way, it's difficult not to start by the quote of most famous Slovenian philosopher, which he has done just a week back, Slavoj Žižek. He basically said, "It is clear that we are approaching the ecological and digital apocalypse, but we should not lose nerves." And he was continuing with quoting Mao Zedong, "Everything under the heaven, it's in ether chaos. The situation, it's ideal." So maybe the situation, it's ideal even for changing the governance and starting seriously to talk about those issues. I think what we have to be aware, and this is absolutely the most important thing that we understand, we have terribly indebted the future generations, and in particular the next one, in ecological and also in the social field, which means that we have to seriously take our own responsibility. I have never considered Greta as a kind of a major success, and the peers which you have seen today on the podium, as a major success of the awakening young generation. Thank God they have awakened, and I very much appreciate that. But it's actually a failure of the old generation, of our generation. And we should understand it in that way. It's a shame that we need 16-year-old kids that they are telling us that we have messed up with the reality. And that's why I firmly believe that we need a kind of intergenerational agreement, something which would be called a program for the next generation, which would put sustainability first, which, by the way, would be 100% aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals, because that's what Sustainable Development Goals are all about. So I think if we use the term of circular in that context of the governance, I would say that we need more of circularity also in the governance, in particular on the global level. We need more of the sharing of sovereignty than owing of sovereignty. Unfortunately, we see many of the developments, and the most tragic development in this context is, of course, in Europe, Brexit. We see going in different direction. So people trying to keep more of their responsibilities, which in the world, which is for the first time really interconnected and interdependent on a global level, it's practically the thing which will not work, and it goes into the wrong direction. So that's, for me, the direction to go. I think it's the cooperation. And if you want the most provocative, I didn't actually decide before to share it, but since you showed the donut on the screen, we are entering the era of the artificial intelligence. And anybody who is not seeing that, it's blind. And we all politicians would subscribe that we would follow the science-based approach. Yeah? So till here we all agree. But even with that, we can easily agree that we have overshooted all the planetary boundaries, or majority, and that we are going in the wrong direction. What would be it if we would give to the artificial science to decide for us a donut? And inside the donut, then, it would be the humans to decide what are the options. Because it's obviously that we need something where we would agree that would not push us over the limits because we are not able to control ourselves. By the way, that would be actually controlling ourselves by the facts which we have evolved in the past, because that's what it is about. So I think we will need to discuss those questions pretty seriously, and these are serious challenges of the future governance, but we don't have a lot of options anymore if we want to put the world in order, and in particular, the understanding how serious it is, it's not among us yet. So we more or less agree, everybody here, and also many outside the room, that transition is unavoidable. But the urgency is simply not there. And discussions about how, where, what are simply missing.
Thank you, Janusz, for your very honest words. You and Mr. Zizek's, which I think are very, I get goosebumps when I hear that, because they're very dramatic. I think that reflects the situation. And I want to pass on to Mr. Kalecha, because the European Commission often is told you are in the ivory tower there, but at the same time, in the last years, the circular economy package that has been driven by you and your team and many supporters was considered a big success. Now, asking you, what do you see as the biggest failure of this or shortcoming on the one hand, and what can we expect from a next package that we all hope for?
Well, first of all, I would like to say I think Janusz is absolutely right in underlining the gravity of the situation. We don't have many options ahead of us. And on top of that, the clock is ticking. So there is a sense of urgency. And this is where we think that the circular economy comes into place, because this offers actually a hope. We can actually change things, even if it's very difficult, even if we know that we have indebted seriously the future generations, that we are facing climate change, that we are facing a very serious ecological crisis. But actually, there's a narrative which allows us, if we take the measures intelligently and practically, and we go in the direction of closing the loop, we can actually have a win for the environment, a win for the economy, and also a social win. And this is, I think, at the origin of the success of the circular economy. In a region of the world like Europe, which does not have many resources, and where we have increased and overstretched our planetary boundaries, we can actually develop a new model which will allow us to reduce, to reuse, to recycle, which will make the possibility for innovation, which will be good for SMEs, which will be positive also for jobs, and which will also be positive for the environment, because we will reduce the emissions. Now, have we done enough? Well, we started with our action plan in December 2015, 54 actions. I always bring it with me, and in the last years, the last months, I show it with pride, because they are all in green, not because we are very green in the EU, as everybody knows, but because we actually completed the 54 actions. How did we set around it? Well, first of all, understanding that circular economy is more than waste. It is about the life cycle. It is about sustainable production and consumption. It is about eco-design. It is about green public procurement. It is about regulation, yes, but it is also about innovation, about standards. So the idea was first to have a plan, also with sectorial measures for biomass, for plastics, for food. Second, try to be inclusive as much as we can and get stakeholder involvement. And I think this has been one of the most important successes, having the business community, the academic, the social partners, everybody, even citizens in cities, having regions coming with their circular economy, having governments coming with their ideas. And then something very important is mobilizing the financing. And in the European Union, we have mobilized 10 billion euros in the past years just on circularity. When you have a plan, you have a strategy, we have the stakeholder platform to bring in the stakeholders, and you mobilize financing, you have the means, you have the objectives, and you have the buy-in. I think so far it has worked very well. In Europe, we have reformed the waste legislation. We want to be the most resource-efficient region in the world. We have launched the plastic strategy, which every day countries are following across the world. We are working in green public procurement. So I think overall we can be satisfied. Have we done enough? No. This was just the first step. Have we done it fast enough? No. We would have liked to have more ambitious targets and earlier, but in a democratic system where you have to persuade the countries and the parliament, we have not been. But of course, we will work for the next steps. I see the clock.
I see
this is a signal for me.
No,
so I will stop there.
It's okay. Maybe you can round it up in 30 seconds.
No, just to say that, of course, we need to work on the second phase. We need to identify the key sectors. I think the key sectors are there. I was this morning participating on textiles. What about clean mobility, electrification? The housing sector is very important for energy. The area of the food sector, there's a lot of food waste. The link between digital and circular economy is very important. Janice was speaking about artificial intelligence, and also the link between climate change and circular economy. I think these are areas where we don't know what the future Commission will decide, but I think there's a lot of work that we need to do, and we need to do it with the stakeholders. We need to do it with business, we need to do it with the academic circles, and we need to do it with the citizens.
Thank you, TG. Alison, so now you came from Australia to this conference, a country which doesn't have a roadmap yet, but there's a lot of activity going on. And we talked this morning about a joint friend who tries to save the Great Barrier Reef. And I always quote his example when he says, I can't save it if I don't fix the agricultural landscape on the east coast of Australia, because all the runoffs from the agricultural system, which is about circular economy. How do you see what's happening in Australia, and what are the main drivers there?
I think for Australia, again, we don't have strong governance around circular economy as of yet. We do not have a roadmap. And so the journey is really being catalysed by individuals such as the one you're mentioning, which is Andy Ridley. So, and those individuals are really looking at the systemic level, the value chains that we need to work across, and are bringing in the government, both state, federal and local government, the citizens, the industry, and having a collective dialogue on the shared problem, but the shared opportunity that's there, and then taking action. And I think that's really what Australia's journey has been to date. And I think with a strategy put in place and mobilising the finance sector, we're really going to see Australia progress quite strongly towards circular economy and catch up to the rest of the world.
Thank you. It's really frustrating we have so little time. Janusz, you wanted to say something, and I wanted to invite if there's one question actually from the floor.
I just wanted to, since I was asked about the governance, in 2 minutes, the whole governance story, if you wish.
Absolutely, please. one and a half would be great.
Yeah, one and a half. Now, engage all the stakeholders, start at the cities regional level, because cities have the governance which is so autonomous that they don't actually need the governance, the governments, and also the global level. Then go on the national level in European Union. All countries should have European roadmaps, action plans, put it into European semester reports, include it into presidency priorities. European Commission should establish credible, mutually reinforcing link between circular economy, SDGs, and competitiveness, which is crucial. On the global level, move from environment, which was the problem in European Union, to embracing into rest of the sectors. And finally, we don't have our own convention. We have climate convention and biodiversity convention. But so you have two alternatives, either to work on your own, but certainly use the existing conventions much better than we are currently using, push the circularity idea there. And the last thing, By the way, everybody is quoting IPCC and IPBS reports. You have your own science policy body that's called International Resource Panel. Use it, because read the reports which we are doing. They will arm you. It's about decoupling, and that's the story of the circular economy.
Exactly.
We are giving you the theoretical and also political armory that you can push the things through your governments.
It's difficult to add to this, Janis, this was great. But we have still 4 minutes and 48 seconds, and I always love if there's some person in the room also that we feel a little bit what's going on there. Does anybody have a question that's bubbling up? Then please, could you raise your hand and shout? Nobody?
No. There are some.
Please, can you be talking very loud? Yes.
I want to make the point.
Yes, ma'am? Okay, I'll give you the mic.
Well, with the risk of making a fool out of myself.
Can you present yourself who you are and please say who you're addressing on the panel?
My name is Sten-Erik Björling. I come from Sweden, and I address the whole panel. I've been working within this field for 30 years, and I would suggest that you more or less start to get serious when it comes to creating a proper goal for all your activities. Because currently now we have on the regional development funds hundreds of billions that are split up in thousands of different efforts, no coordination, no way of actually having these different solutions to interact with each other efficiently. And that is a big frustration for me because I see all this money just floating out. And the implementable results are actually quite minimal compared to what you are sending out. So I would strongly suggest that you work very hard on trying to create global corporations with the large economies in the world of creating standards for information exchange, knowledge exchange. The whole Eurasian part here will soon mean that about 4 to 5 billion of people will be having internet access. And that means that we'll have a tremendous amount of innovative capacity by that. The second thing is that it's estimated in 2030, the Asian middle class will be 10 times larger than the current American one. That means that if you don't get your resource optimizations working, we will see a flash in the pan, no more resources, and we have probably within 5 years no liquid fossil fuels left.
Can I interrupt you there, sir? A question or comment?
That is a comment and a strong recommendation to get your bloody act together.
Okay, thank you. I think we all applaud this. What's the second question in the back? For Christian, do you want to comment? Do we comment in between on the role of business before we come? No, okay, question. Please, briefly, we only have 2 minutes, very brief.
Can you hear me?
Please.
Alan Amirkanian from the American University of Armenia. A question about countries like Armenia, where developing or transitional, not a very big industrial sector, and yet agriculture sector is big. And the focus, a lot of circular economy focus, of course, is material flows. There isn't as much focus on, let's say, the agricultural sector. And I think it would be a good way of bringing soil policy, fertilizer policy, pesticide policy, bringing these countries into the fold of circular economy.
Want to comment on this a second?
The gentleman is absolutely correct, and so it's the first one.
Okay, perfect. Kirsi,
Sure.
please.
So just very briefly, I don't think we have time to address all the questions, but I want to quickly build on Mr. Kaleha's comments on the importance of inclusiveness, which is something that we learned in the roadmap process, both in developing as well as starting to implement that, is that it needs a true, transparent and interactive multi-stakeholder process. And out of all different stakeholders included, and what I want to emphasize here from my own perspective, where I also believe that the sort of will lie a lot of the responsibility in not sort of just addressing many of the sustainability challenges we are facing globally, but also sort of facilitating the transition towards a circular economy, is that business will have an extremely important role sort of in making this all happen. Sort of that is the only way to come up with innovations, with solutions, and with new business models that are scalable and that sort of can be be big enough, that can be sort of applied sort of globally, that can have an impact on a global scale. So everything, of course, what we are talking about related to governance, be that regulations or be that then outside of that changes in consumer behavior, it's all needed. But a lot of this is happening way too slowly. So we really need to turn this around and also look at that. It's happening already, sort of as a sort of business case, something that also makes economically sense. And that is why I want to sort of include some optimism into this discussion. So I have a background in technology industry myself, and I am a technology expert, be that AI, be that IoT, or sort of many other sort of ways you can sort of look at that and resolve these issues. I think sort of there is hope there, but we need to be fast.
Yeah. With this, thank you for the debate. It's always very frustrating to have so little time.
Yeah.
And I think we all need to balance in the next years anyway the need for speed, the gravity of the situation, which can be depressing, of the optimism we all need to get up with to make things happen. So thank you all. And I think I have handing over to Kari again. And we are leaving
Yes.
and leave Rod Stewart this podium.
All right, I think it's time to kind of have the global look at the roadmaps, and that's for why we have now, I think, great examples from different parts of the world of the experiences of making the roadmap and also some lessons learned as well. So I would like to first introduce Ladeja. Ladeja is from Slovenia and from founder and executive director of Circular Change. So you will tell first 5 minutes from your experiences. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much. So, yeah, I will introduce you our circular journey of Slovenia, but I'm here in two roles. One is that I'm the founder of Circular Change platform from Slovenia. This is the country of just the right size, 2 million people altogether. And this is the only country with love in its name, what means that we are bringing heart to this. So it will be a little bit emotional as well, so I dare do that. And the second role is that I'm the chair of Circular Economy Platform in Brussels. This is European Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform, where you are all kindly invited to contribute and participate, because this platform is offering space for exchange. So now back to our roadmap. As I said, it was a journey, and just few facts to encourage you a bit. So it took us 9 months. I'm also a mother of 3 kids, so 3 times a child was born, the 4th time the roadmap was born. So this is something very natural. The second thing is that the contractor of this project was the Ministry of the Environment in Slovenia, but we were lucky enough that at that time our Prime Minister was supporting the idea of circular economy, and there was also a partnership for green economy established under the Prime Minister. So it helped because it was not only one ministry. Usually the Ministry of Environment cannot do everything. It is really something what should be done among different ministries, and that was the right momentum in Slovenia. And there was a consortium of partners who were working on that particular project. So the goals were set. It was about outlining the potentials of Slovenia, involving stakeholders, because as we have heard, it is really important to hear what is happening, who can offer what. Circular economy is not something, or the principles are not something what would not be there already. So it's also about taking a role that you're in helicopter monitoring who is doing what, and maybe that person does not know that it is already circular. So that is also the role. Then to create recommendations, and then for the government, and to identify the opportunities. So that was the setup. And on this journey that took 9 months, yes, we did a lot of work that was very much bottom-up. So it was grounded on that, what I said, 2 million people, what we did, more than 20 workshops around Slovenia, engaging different stakeholders, getting out of that, who is doing what, mapping that, and that was the basis of our document. And out of that came this kind of, let's say, we defined 4 priority areas. It's always hard to say what should be the priority area, because everything is interdependent and interconnected. So whatever you put in your roadmap, it is not, the rest is not excluded. It is just that you have to focus a bit. So in our case, it was about food system. We have heard how important that is. Forest-based value chains. We were very much inspired by Citra and your roadmap, and Slovenia is very green as well, 68% of forests. Then manufacturing industry, mobility. So these are 4 priority areas that were defined, and there is always a kind of negotiation around that, and some people are more happy, some less, but you have to start somewhere. So the next thing is what you see inside and on the right side as well. So this is so-called circular triangle. Why? Because we realized that circular economy is addressing mostly businesses, and it is about the business model. But it is not the only thing that can contribute to the change. So we have heard also today the Commissioner Vella, who said, for circular change, I was so flattered because this is about us, it is crucial that all stakeholders are engaged, and this systemic approach is needed. So one is circular economy as such, the second is really systemic approach to make this change happen, and at the end, it is about people. So without circular culture, based on the values, nothing can happen, because it's about mindset. It's not just about we have these IT solutions, we have digitalization, all that data is available. But we are asking the question all the time, so why don't we move? And I have to move. So it is about people. Therefore, we are very much fostering this aspect of social component of that and of this circular culture. And usually when we are on the stage, we do not share what was going on backstage, but I will do that today. So on the backstage, or in the backstage, there were mainly 4 authors writing this document, not a big group, and some other co-authors. There was no serious research done before, so there was no big consultancy companies as in some other countries. So we started from the scratch using what was there. There was only a tiny budget allocated for that, so it was driven on our enthusiasm and very much bottom up. And we've got one secret ingredient, and everyone should look for that secret ingredient. In our case, this was Janez Potočnik, the former commissioner, who is not only a library, but he is a great mentor, and he shared generously his knowledge. So instead of having all those consultants and companies, we got him, and it contributed really significantly to the document. So look for your secret ingredient. That would be my advice. And just to conclude, 3 takeaways, because it's then easier when you are going on your circular journey. First, learn from others. We are all open to share. Do that. So take it as a process, not as a project. You cannot do it the best way, or it cannot be fixed. What we see now with Finland and Citra, there is already the 2nd edition, and the movement is going on. So be humble and just start it. And the third thing would be do it your way, because there is no copy-paste. You can learn from others. We are willing to share, but it's up to you to do it the way you can do that in your country. So thank you very much, and I hope that I inspired you to go on this very exciting journey. Thank you.
Thank you, Ladea. Great. Love, and then also backstage learnings and secret sauce. Fantastic. So let's move on now. So let's take next one. Ashley, it's your turn. So your learnings from Australia.
Correct.
Welcome.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Ashley Morris. I'm the CEO of Choreo, a company dedicated to catalysing Australasia's transition towards a circular economy. As you are aware, this session is titled Governance and Circular Economy Roadmaps. But what you may not be aware of, though, is that Australia has neither. In light of this, you may now wonder why Australia has been included in the session and questioning what lessons we can impart. I want to share that in the absence of clear and stable leadership, Australia's transition towards a circular economy was catalysed by individuals that recognised that change would not come if they waited for some other person or some other time. I'm proud to say that I'm one of the many individuals responsible for taking bold action to take circular economy out of theory and to put it into practice, with the intention to irrefutably demonstrate the value that circular economy can provide to our communities, for our corporations, and for our government. In 2017, as world leaders met for the inaugural World Circular Economy Forum, Scott Morrison, our now Prime Minister, brought a lump of coal into the Australian Parliament. This media stunt was unsurprising, but very alarming that it came from a representative of the people. This was the impetus for me to take action and for many others to take action. So, for 6 months, my co-founder and I worked with 45 small businesses in one precinct to implement 6 circular economy principles. Together, we created an environment built on trust and collaboration that helped unlock economic opportunities for this precinct. We worked to change the narrative around what was possible through collaboration, thus enhancing the social outcomes and ultimately reducing the street's dependence on finite resources. This project was aptly titled The Circular Experiment and became a conduit for dialogue with government and industry on the opportunity and value of a circular economy. The Circular Experiment concluded in December 2017, and although it stemmed from the grassroots of regional Australia, it became the reference point for how to create systemic change towards a circular economy nationally. Over the past 18 months, the circular economy has gone from strength to strength, with key actions including one of Australia's largest property and construction companies, Lend-Lease, developing the country's first circular economy master plan community that will be home to 45,000 people. Australia's largest airport, the Brisbane Airport, is working to transition their material flows to be completely circular and eliminating single-use coffee cups through the implementation of Coffee Cup as a Service. 5 Australian state governments are working towards the formation of circular economy policies, including one state investing $1.5 million into the creation of a circular economy innovation network. The Australian federal government has formed an interjurisdictional working group on circular economy to align on the definition and the actions that will be taken thereafter. Australia and New Zealand are now also collaborating to deliver the circular experiment in Rotorua, and they are forming a collaborative relationship to address shared challenges such as ocean plastics. However, the most prominent and globally relevant action towards a circular economy is Australia's Circular Economy Lab. The lab is supported by government, it is led by industry and dedicated to action. The 28 companies invested have a combined annual revenue of $170 billion. Within the lab, these companies are positioned to solve 5 systemic challenges, from water scarcity through to contaminated plastics. This initiative is a first, with corporations working together through collaboration and co-innovation to create commercially viable circular economy solutions. The Circular Economy Lab is Australia's demonstration of SDG 17, the goal for partnerships, and our nod to the scale-up theme of this year's 2019 World Circular Economy Forum. I would like to now close by reminding everyone that the transition to a circular economy has no borders and knows no bounds. It is a privilege to be here today, and in respect of this privilege and the thousands of humble change makers who aren't in this room, I challenge everyone to make sure our time here is worth it. What project, partnership, collaboration or relationship can you form? Take home, learn and implement to propel the circular economy forward globally. We cannot do this alone. Thank you so much.
Really inspiring story about how to move things from the grassroots level as well, and I'm proud to be part of the Circular Lab as well as an advisor. Let's move forward. Now it's Guillermo Gonzalez, Head of Circular Economy Office, Ministry of Environment, Chile. Welcome.
Hello. So, how do we face the transition to a circular economy in a country like Chile, a 17 million people country where we're still landfilling 96% of our municipal waste, where our economy is mostly centered around the linear economy, mining being the most relevant economic activity? A country that is 200 kilometers wide by 4,000 kilometers long, stretching from the Atacama Desert to Patagonia. So linear by its mere geography. how do we make Chile circular? Well, we know two things. One, we cannot really imagine very well what a circular Chile looks like, first thing. Second, however circular Chile looks like, it will take us at least a couple of decades to be there, at least. I'm the head of the Circular Economy Office. We will be in office for 2 years and 9 more months. So how do we do this transition that would take us at least 2 decades? Well, we are convinced that, just as has been said here repeatedly, we need to get all the actors on board, right? We are leading this from the Ministry of the Environment, but we're working hand in hand with the Ministry of the Economy and with our innovation agency to make sure that everyone understands that this is not only part of a sustainability agenda, it's also part of our competitiveness and productivity agendas. But also we need the other stakeholders. We need business, we need academia, civil society, and that's why we are preparing to produce a roadmap in the second semester of this year, a circular economy roadmap for Chile. When we talked about this with the minister, she said, I love the idea, we need to do it, and we need to do it really well. But I want a target. I want a quantitative target to call everyone on the table and not just talk ideas. And so we took several weeks to look at different indicators. That's one of the pending challenges here. We don't still have a good circularity indicator. We went back to the traditional indicator of waste, and we took the EU targets. 2030, they want to go to, by 2035, to 65% recycling and 10% landfilling maximum. And we said, we're not going to get there in 2035, we can get there in 2040, but how do we do that? Can we do that as in Chile, you know? Well, we know we need to tackle food waste, we need to tackle plastics, we need to tackle construction, but how do we go about there? You know, a rough estimate is that if we want to build all the infrastructure we need to be able to process, to make our organic waste circular, we have a $1 billion bill just in terms of CapEx, of investment, right? Who will pay that bill? And that takes us to some policy instruments that range from extended producer responsibility that we are already working on, to waste fees, to taxation, to certain prohibitions, right? So we're convinced this is big-time policy discussions that need to go on when we have the participatory process of this roadmap during the second semester of this year. And that's just on the policy side. And then we need all the other actions from business, academia, and civil society, as I mentioned. One last thing. You are probably all aware that Chile is hosting COP25 in December of this year. One of the most relevant words there has to do with ambition, right? We really need to get more ambitious in order to meet the 2 degrees target. And not only because we are convinced that circular economy is part of climate action, or because we want to keep our country as beautiful as you can see in these images, that we are convinced we need to have the same level of ambition in our roadmap. We have done it in the past. We had an energy strategy 2050, and in a few years, we became one of the world leaders in renewable energies, in solar and wind energy. We are convinced we can do the same here. Thank you.
Thank you, Guillermo. It's great that you emphasize the kind of practical goals and that something that we can really measure, and hopefully in due time we can learn from your experiences in Chile as well. So let's move forward. So next we have Kok Chang Chiang, Deputy Director General, National Environment Agency, Singapore. Please.
Thank you, Gary. Hi, so we'll move from hearing about circularity in one of the longest countries in the world and swing to the other extreme, and I'll try to bring some perspectives to trying to go circular in the context of a very small open economy. I thought that I could speak up here as the smallest country on the panel, but Slovenia beat us to it. We have a smaller population, but we can still claim to be smallest in terms of geographical area. To help you to imagine how small we are, picture the whole population of Finland packed into Helsinki city, right? That's the density we're talking about. So without a hinterland, most of our primary resources are imported, and without a large domestic market, most manufactured goods are exported. Hence, trade is more than 3 times that of our GDP. This physical limitation, it both pushes us towards circularity, and yet it makes its attainment more challenging. Let me elaborate. The land constraint forces us to focus on the proper disposal of waste, since we cannot afford to have any land wasted by contamination. It dictates that we move away from direct landfilling. Hence, non-recycled waste are sent to waste-to-energy plants, with the remaining incineration ash sent to our only landfill, which is reclaimed from the sea. As even sea space becomes increasingly precious resource too, we are now working on the recycling of this incineration ash into building materials so as to be able to reduce future demands on sea space. However, we recognize that a rigorous waste management system is not the same as a circular economy, even though it could be a very good starting point. There is still tremendous value in the resource chains to be reclaimed, and we are figuring out what measures we need to get us there. So we have been coming to the World Circular Economy Forum since the first edition to learn what other countries are doing. And we do realize that some measures are perhaps less relevant to our context. For example, our ability to stipulate circular product design is unlikely to be very effective given our small domestic market. So for a start, we intend to focus on a few key initiatives under 3 categories. 1, for sustainable production, although industrial symbiosis has always been a key consideration in the allocation of factory sites to industries, we need a better understanding of material flows within industry so that we can take industrial symbiosis to the next level. We improve matching of waste and resources across premises. 2, for sustainable consumption, beyond encouraging consumers to waste less and recycle more, we are exploring how we can foster a culture of repair, sharing, and donation, such as by promoting the repair trade and encouraging people to donate old clothes instead of throwing them away. It is unfortunate that currently it is still more convenient to dispose than to donate. We'll have to see how the donation infrastructure can be ramped up to make it the more convenient option. 3, for sustainable resource management, we need to better segregate waste streams so that maximum value can be reclaimed from each stream. According to a household survey, households are very supportive of recycling, but quite a number are still uncertain what's the correct way to do it. So we have launched a Recycle Right campaign to improve household recycling practices by providing clearer guidance on how to recycle. So to take the circular economy plan forward, we'll focus our efforts on closing the loop for selected waste streams. Let me elaborate on e-waste as one. We'll establish an e-waste extended producer responsibility framework by 2021. So after collection by the PRO, local recyclers will dismantle the e-waste into different materials. However, we find that for some materials, we simply do not have sufficient scale to sustain local recycling facilities. So for this, we will either have to import more of these resources or to export them. This highlights a constraint to circularity in a small economy. Sometimes, circularity does not make sense within the confines of national boundaries. Some recycling facilities are economically viable only at a regional scale. But this will involve the movement of materials across borders, and frameworks to provide clarity and certainty on such movements will help. To close, I will write on the point made by the UN Assistant Sec Jack Elliott this morning that the international trading system has to be supportive of the movement of used materials. And I'll pitch that for smaller countries like Singapore, realizing full potential circularity will require cooperation across countries, and the WCEF can certainly play a role in this. Thank you.
Thank you, Kok, and especially for emphasizing the trading, and Finland is also open economy, so really important part of it. So let's move forward. Now I would like to invite Leah Canning. You're already there, so Senior Policy Advisor, Environment and Climate Change Canada. Welcome.
Good afternoon. It's my pleasure to be here with you to share some Canadian perspectives on this important topic. Canada does not currently have a circular economy roadmap, but increasingly circular economy is at the core of strategies, action plans being implemented at all levels, including at the national level. And I thought I would take a few brief moments to share some key considerations for circular economy in the Canadian context, and then speak to a very specific example in the context of plastics. So like Chile, we are an extremely large country, and yet we have a relatively small population. Most of our population is found in a number of very large cities that are also located at quite a distance from each other. But we have a large proportion of our population living in thousands of rural, remote, and isolated communities, indigenous communities from coast to coast to coast. And this diversity of experience of Canadians must be taken into consideration when we implement strategies and roadmaps, or we risk having actions taking place in isolation and we can't achieve the kind of scale that we're seeking to drive here at this forum. Canada is also very jurisdictionally complex. We have very strong and autonomous orders of government, and there are very few policy issues relevant to the circular economy that don't cross jurisdictional boundaries, which means that intergovernmental cooperation, coordination, clarity on roles and responsibilities for implementation will be crucial for a successful circular economy. Of course, in the context of a just and inclusive circular economy, I have to speak to Canada's priority of advancing reconciliation with its Indigenous peoples. This will need to be at the forefront as well as we move forward and globally and within the Canadian context. I'll also speak to our economy. We're different than some of the circular economy leaders in that we have a very resource-based and export-oriented economy. We're also a very small, generally speaking, usually a very small share of markets, and we're very integrated into international supply chains and North American supply chains in particular, which means we're very much in support of global cooperation and global collaboration to address issues that really must be address the whole value chain. And so I'd like to speak very briefly to the Canada-wide strategy on zero plastic waste. This is a strategy that was announced in Canada by all of the provincial, territorial, and federal ministers of health. Of environment in November of last year. It was developed in a relatively short period of time, less than 6 months following the release of the Ocean Plastics Charter under Canada's G7 presidency. And despite the very short time frame, it was informed by extensive stakeholder consultations all across the plastics value chain, as well as a dialogue on plastic waste that was undertaken with the Canadian population. And the strategy, recognizing these considerations for Canada, really emphasizes shared roles, responsibility, the need for all actors, from individuals, industry, all orders of government, not-for-profits, the need for the entire Canadian society to act to address a very ambitious vision, which is zero plastic waste, adopting a circular economy for plastics. Now, of course, the next step is developing an action plan, and that is currently in progress. But I share this example, and we've laid out on the diagram, that addresses the entire life cycle of plastics, seeking a very ambitious vision. But it was implemented quickly in a rather complex environment of Canada. And so I think it is an example of hope that when there is a shared vision, we can come together and overcome all these considerations and take action. And so thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Liana. It's great that we are partnering with the World Circular Economy Forum as well. I'm looking forward to the event in Canada. So next, we'll continue and go to South Africa. It's Henry Roman, Director, Department of Science and Technology. Please come on stage.
Thank you. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Just to kick off, South Africa is at the southernmost tip of Africa, about twice the size of France and about an eighth of the size of Canada. We have 57 million people with a wide variety of cultures, religions, and 11 official languages, hence our nickname, the Rainbow Nation. We have a national development plan, Vision 2030, that maps out the trajectory that the country wants to follow towards development and economic growth. One of the ambitions of this development plan is for a just transition to a low-carbon economy that is both inclusive and sustainable. Like many of the people who spoke before me, we are still developing a circular economy roadmap. We don't have one at this time. Like Chile and Canada, we are a resource-intensive economy, so we're starting to look at what does a post-mining landscape look like for us, and what are we going to do in that economic world. But we do have some roadmap experience that contributes to a circular economy, and one of those is the National Waste Research, Development and Innovation Roadmap. Importantly, as everybody has said, co-creation is key. That roadmap was developed over 60 meetings with 30 meetings with 60 participants from government, private sector, academia, and civil society. Why an STI approach, or science, technology, innovation approach? Opportunities that are created through R&D and innovation unlocks new solutions, informs the policy development and implementation by creating feedback loops between the policymakers and the academics, informs a technology uptake, and brings us the scientific evidence forward. Now, this is just how we are conceptualizing where circular economy fit. There's a lot of noise in the system. We've got circular economy, bioeconomy, eco-innovation, natural capital, eco-efficiency. It's confusing to most people. So what we did was we started a process to develop a circular economy needs assessment for the country. And this is one of the outcomes is we have an ambition to green our economy. And circular economy is definitely one of those pathways that get you to green the economy, amongst all these other things. And you can see some are interrelated as well. Because we needed something to go talk to an economist about. Not a resource economist that understands this stuff, but the guy in Citibank that's only worried about the bottom line. We need to talk to him in a language he understands. And we spent a lot of time, we spoke to our stock exchange, we spoke to actually the Citibank, to the economists, to understand from their perspective why it's difficult to move to a circular economy so that we can start looking at it. We're also developing a decadal plan for South Africa around STI. And circular economy is integral to the new white paper on science and technology for South Africa. And as a developing country, we also need to understand where the greatest demand for resources will be, both now and in the future, and what measures we need to put in place now to meet those developmental objectives. Because remember, we have also in South Africa, you've got a dual economy. You've got a large informal sector, and our waste sector is dependent on that informal sector. There are 90,000 of these people that without them, our recycling economy falls down. And we need a way to address that. We also have to meet our international obligations, the NDCs, the SDGs, etc. We need to meet those as well. I'm just going to skip to close to the end, sorry. 5 minutes is shorter than one thinks. In closing, I think it is important for us to understand also, and as many people have said this, SDG 17 can be applied at any sphere of government, and it isn't the exclusive domain of collaboration between the global north and the global south. The transfer of that information, the knowledge, etc., can happen within any space. And we need to understand that. We can learn from each other as much as we can learn from that disparate groupings, as I said. But also, as has been said, we only have 10 years to avoid a global tipping point. And we can only do this by transitioning to a global, shared, inclusive, and circular economy, in my opinion. I thank you.
Well, you can stand over. That's fine. So I think you have been so good with the timing, so we have actually time for questions. And I'd like to ask all the 6 roadmap speakers on stage once again, and you have your mic on. That's great. This is a surprise part of the whole thing, and you can now ask whatever you want from their experience about the roadmaps or plans of making ones. And is there questions? I can't see hands yet, but there is. All right, great. So let's start from there.
Hello, my name is Catherine Barth, coming from Circular Norway. It's so interesting to listen to the pioneers and front runners doing the roadmaps and testing for different varieties of governance. What would you say would be the most important outcomes, gaining key insight and learning how did you achieve employment, job creation, SDG goals? Would there be like some similarities here, or what would be the key takeaways for impact?
Who wants to take it?
Okay.
Ladea, you seem to be ready. Go ahead.
I can do it. Yes, absolutely. It has to be a part of the whole story. So roadmap as such is only a process, as I said, not a project. And it has to be integrated in everything what is going on. So SDGs are the biggest or the broadest framework within which we should address different SDGs, which are interconnected, by the way, so we cannot address one without taking into account the others. So definitely yes, and from our experience, and because I'm very honest and open, I will share that what we are lacking in Slovenia is the next step. So the roadmap started, all this movement started, everything, but now we do not have the action plan and we do not monitor enough what is happening on the ground. So I would say that let's be this the start of the journey, but the others should stay with you on the whole trip. So that is very important because then you can measure your impact, and it is always good to know what you have achieved.
And Guillermo, you want to?
Yeah, just as a complementary note there, go back to what I mentioned. I believe that we still do not have good circularity indicators we can refer to. That's a pending challenge, and we need to take that seriously to make this agenda more powerful.
Very good. Do I see?
Sorry,
go ahead.
I just want to add, many speakers spoke about the need to engage stakeholders. So from our experience is one key stakeholder to really bring on board for us is the need to bring our fellow colleagues within government from the economic development agencies on board. What we learn is that circular economy cannot be something that is driven from purely environmental perspectives because it is about changing the economic models. So we have had to learn to speak about circular economy and interpret it in a language that our colleagues from economic development agencies would appreciate, such that they can see the value of pursuing this agenda as well. And so that has been a very key part of our work in trying to get to some kind of roadmap.
All right, then I see a lot of hands. Let's go from there and then.
Hello, many thanks. A brief comment from the Arctic point of view. I'm Pekka Semeka from the Finnish Foreign Ministry, and I've been chairing the Arctic Council's Sustainable Development Working Group for the last 2 years. I was very happy to hear comments here by Canada, but also a question from Norway. We did not manage to organize a side session on the Arctic and circular economy this time, but I could presume that we might have a chance for that in the next forum in Canada. So thank you for that, and of course the circular economy discussion is very much needed in the Arctic context as well.
Very good point. Here's a here.
Thank you. Neil Guntash from UNIDO. Just want to ask all the colleagues what they would suggest how to proceed in developing countries where there is almost no data? So, one. Two, would you recommend to bring in the bankers from the central bank, the Ministry of Finance, who usually has any data and the best data in any country, including very poor, huge Nigeria, I think 200 million people, small country in Africa. So what would be your recommendation, and how do you make it simple so the politicians will take the dive? Thank you.
Excellent questions. Henry, you are ready for this?
As a developing country, we're also pretty lucky in that we have a very good body called Stats SA that collects good statistics at country top level. When we started our waste roadmap, for instance, there was very little data. So we had to spend the time and the money and the effort to get sufficient data, not all the data, but sufficient data to allow us to begin planning a roadmap for that. We also we're finalizing our indicators for circular economy as well in partnership with UNEP. So if you don't have indicators that can talk to a treasury department, they don't really pay attention to what you have to say. So we also bring them into the discussions up front as well, so that they understand what we're thinking, where we're going, because they're the guys that drive the incentives and the policy around investment that help you to actually achieve your goal. So I think it's important to spend the groundwork, do the groundwork, because if you don't have the evidence on which to base what you want to do, you're going to struggle.
There's a question over there.
Hello, Jacques Genot from the University of Applied Science in Switzerland. First of all, thank you for the different roadmap presentation. Very inspiring, and also the passion you put in this different program, not a process or program, not a project. I have one question. You are all engaged by your government. How do you deal with your government when they take some decisions which are more linear economy than circular one? How do you deal with?
Excellent. So, who starts? Do I see any hands here? No?
Okay, I can pick those questions that are so tricky. Yeah, we should wait out how is
yes.
it?
Maybe you can go.
So I'm definitely not from government, but we work alongside the government, and I think it's about creating pathways for action for the government. And government does focus on risk a lot of the time, so it's about de-risking opportunities for them to step into more of a circular economy. So I don't look at it as a bad thing that they're still in that linear mode. I look at it as an opportunity, or where I need to, myself, but many others need to show up where they need to, invest the time and energy in circular economy. And we need to be able to point to those demonstrations from around the world to say, this is a way you could do it, and build that confidence and trust with them.
Yeah. Okay, Guillermo, you want to?
Yeah, I would just I would just like add to that we are not paid by the government neither, only for this process. We were otherwise we are a private non-profit organization, and I see this role, as you mentioned, so to be a kind of orchestrator among different stakeholders as a crucial one, because everyone plays his or her own role, and only by this kind of nourishing this collaboration and enabling this space for collaboration we can move forward. And yes, you have to be terribly patient. I'm impatient by nature, so for me this is something what has to do with karma.
So I'm from government, but I think there's something that needs to be said that, as you all know, government is a complex bureaucracy, and so within government there's energies flowing in different directions, right? And I think there's still, in our case, there's still a way to go in terms of convincing the other sectors that this is not only about sustainability, it's also good for them. I mean, we were discussing extended producer responsibility for tires, and that goes to the Council of Ministers, where we have all the ministers, mining, economy, etc., and energy. And so that was a very enriching discussion, you could say, in terms of really getting the message across. Finally, we did get our point across, and that was good news. But this is something that also needs to be done within government.
Excellent. I see so many hands. Unfortunately, I can't. Is there one burning question there? I can see that. Let's take that. Okay, go ahead. No?
Okay, thank you. Petra Könke from the Club of Rome. And I think we published a report a long time ago where it's about the limits to growth. And the circular economy, sometimes tackles the growth problem and sometimes not. But what I would like to ask you a little bit about the backstage, because these are really pioneering roadmaps, and I really admire this. The little backstage information on what are the narratives that you're working with, because it must be narratives of future possibilities, narratives about a different future, but also a narrative of this is the way to go, there is just nothing else that we can do. And how do you bring in the narratives that actually engage people?
All right, who will start? Ladia, you seem to be again ready.
Yeah. This is my favorite topic, about this new narrative and about these different languages. So I think it's of crucial importance, and we discussed it just in the break, how important is it what we address and what wording do we use for that? So is it about growth, or is it about inclusiveness, or is it about sharing, or is it about competition? So my favorite statement is, let's move from the battlefields to the playgrounds, because this makes the major shift. So, and this is the art of communication, I would say. And at the end, it is about what is in it for me. Everyone who gets to the table, we like to be in our comfort zone. So we don't want to change. None of us does. So therefore, it's so important to understand, yes, I can benefit out of that, but through the collaboration, not to be egoistic and egocentric, but really to have this feeling of community. So
excellent. Leah, you had a point.
Yeah, I'll just say a lot of the narrative in plastics, the driver was marine pollution, plastic litter, but the narrative around the strategy has been keeping plastics in the economy and out of the environment, and that really is a mental shift in thinking about plastic waste and circularity, and I think it's a narrative that's taken hold.
Go ahead.
I was just going to add to both of those statements to really, circular economy is really about storytelling. Data is fundamentally important, and we need better data across the globe. But I think it is about evoking and emoting action, and that really comes through really good communication and telling stories that we care about, that we identify value in, because as we were staying up on the stage, even for internal and government, people invest in people, and we are all people no matter what role we're in. So we really need to connect with that individual value, and that's the proposition. It's a values-driven approach to action.
Yeah.
For a country like ours, which is a small country, very much connected to the global economy, the message that has been more effective so far has to do with making it clear to everyone that this is a big challenge, but it's also a big opportunity, and that if we do not take the opportunity, we're going to be left behind globally. And that resonates with other sectors. This is something we need to be working on, or otherwise we are going to be late.
Excellent. So we are closing soon. One key message from each from you, from lessons learned or something that you see really vital when you think about the roadmaps and the execution. We can start from each. Do you want to go?
Yeah, I think the message of inclusion is critical.
Very good.
Take action. Just get started.
We're still in the learning process. I can give you but I mean, ambition, I think, is again the word I would use. We really need to be ambitious here to try to envision what this transformation really looks like.
Very good.
Yeah, from our side also, inclusion's key, and just to note that towards the end of this year, we'll be having an EU dialogue on circular economy, where we're going to be looking at how do we draft that 10-year plan from an RDI perspective or SDI perspective to address the transition towards one.
I think that it is the question of trust. So do we trust each other that we can do that jointly?
Sorry, I'll just come back to the last question about narrative. For Singapore, it is a bit easier because we are such a small country, so we frame it as an existential question. We just say that we have not much land left, nor sea space left for future landfills. So you want to leave some space for future generations of the country to enjoy, we need to be more circular.
Excellent. Big applause to all the experts. Thank you for all the questions and exciting talks we have had. And I'd like to say that, of course, we will be also available at the Citra stand. So if you are available for that further discussions. And I also like to say that at Citra, we are pushing also more global agenda in the coming years. And we are very interested to talk everybody about the actions that we can take together. Thank you very much.
Thank you.